Hi everyone, and welcome to another video of Terraform. My name is Tia from DevOps Easy Learning, and today we'll be going through Terraform data source part 1, right? Why did I call this part 1? Because I'm going to kind of shoot another video, which is going to be part 2. What is the purpose of Terraform data source? Let's say you basically have a resource that is already created in AWS. Maybe it wasn't created using by Terraform. It might be something like a VPC, right? And you want to kind of take the VPC ID or some subnet and use that to create maybe an EKS cluster or an EC2 instance. How are you going to do? Because in some cases, even in the real world, you might have something that was already created. It might be through Terraform, and maybe you need, especially a VPC. Maybe you need a VPC ID to create a security group, or you need a some VPC subnet to basically go ahead and create maybe an EKS cluster or EKS node group and so on. How are you going to get those information so that you will not just hard code those information in your code, right? You can basically hard code those information in your code, but that is not a good way. How do you basically allow Terraform to go out there and grab those information automatically and put it in your code? Let me go ahead here and click on this Terraform icon, and this is going to kind of take us into my GitHub repository, where I'm going to make sure that I also put the link in the description of this video. And in here, we'll have a sample code that we are going to use. I don't really like to use anything here through GitHub. What I'm going to do here is what I will just I've cloned this repository already and I have it local, and I will just navigate to the root of this repository and make sure that I move into this path, and I'll open this one in VS Code. Now, PWD, this is basically the root of this repository, like I mentioned earlier. I can go ahead now and CD. It is a public repository. You can go ahead and check it out as needed. Now, let me type code here to open this one in VS Code. Here, we can have a couple of files here. One is the main.tf that just hold the main configuration just to create an EC2 instance. And here we have a data source. And right here, we also have an Ubuntu data source. Now, let us focus more here. We have some outputs here. Let us focus more on the data source. In data source here, this is just like one example where we have a VPC already created in AWS, like I mentioned earlier. And we want to get all VPC subnets and also the VPC ID. And we kind of want to use one of those information here to create an EC2 instance. And also we want to get the security group ID of just one security group ID. And I basically created the security group already in AWS, and that security group is called Allow Traffic Security Group. All traffic. It's just a security group that will allow all traffic. Now, if you hook over to AWS a little bit, I'm basically using my default VPC here for this example. And within my default VPC, I've renamed all subnets and call everything default, including the VPC ID itself. As you guys can see here, default, I just renamed the default as default VPC, and this is the default VPC when I created my account. And this one, if you basically click on subnets, you guys will see that all subnets are called default. This one is just another VPC that was created, but this one is called default. You guys will see that this in this availability zone, in this North Virginia, we have 6 availability zone, right? And that is why we have default 1, default 2, default 3, default 4 into a default 5. Now, if I want to, first of all, get this VPC ID, what am I going to do? First thing that I did is to have a tag. That means I can rename, I can add the tag to this default VPC. And if you click on tag here, you guys will see that I basically give a tag called name, and the value here is default. And I will basically use this key. This can be anything that you want, but when you want to pass this through Terraform, you to use the exact information. If you this name, this can be anything that you want, right? I basically choose to put it as default VPC so that when I log in my AWS account, I know exactly that this is my default VPC. I don't want to delete my default VPC by mistake. Everything that everything that is default in AWS, I always like to rename it as default and make sure that I don't delete that. We can always create that. That's not a big deal. Now, let me go ahead here and kind of see what happened here. If you want to kind of get to default VPC, this is the data source that I usually use, right? And what is it doing? I will use a filter here, and I will filter something based on tag. As you can see, data, and I say AWS underscore VPC, and this name can be anything. This one can be anything. Now, I am going to just filter that. I'm going to filter that based on the tag. And we will say tag colon name. That means tag colon name is here. We say, okay, tag column name. What do we want to take here? That's tag column name will basically take the key, and what will be the value of this tag? The value will be default VPC. And that is what you get to see here, tag column name. And what is the value? The value is default VPC. Subnet, the same thing. As you guys can see, I rename all my subnet to be default 1, default 2, default 3, default 4, default 5, default 6, and so on. If you click on subnet, you guys will see default 1. If you click on the tag, I have here name default 01. And it is the same thing. Like if you're going to launch a VPC using Terraform, you will go ahead also. I think this one also was launched using Terraform. And this is like kind of a good example here. Let's say I want to go ahead and get this public subnet ID. I can filter everything based on the tag. And as you guys can see here, I have multiple tags. If you like, I can filter based on the tag, the tag column name, and the value will be this. Or I can go ahead and filter it based on the tag column environment, and the value will be this. You can basically filter this thing based on multiple ones, but I usually like to use a column name because I know for sure that this will be there. As you guys can see, I filter based on the name, and I will grab the name. And when I grab the name from there, I can extract the ID in Terraform, right? Now, same thing apply for other subnets, and that is what I've done so far. Here, this one here, I basically have this security group created. See here, data and AWS underscore security group. This can be anything. Now, let me go and check this security group and kind of see the tag that was assigned to this security group. Go over to AWS. Let's say you have a security group that was already created, and you want to use that to do something in Terraform. Let us click security group. It is under EC2 instance. If you click EC2 instance and kind of look for security group, I'll have a security group here that have the name called all traffic. And if you click on that, you guys will see that I kind of put a tag with a name, allow all traffic. And here I am trying to filter that based on the tag column name and the value. This one will basically get the name, right? And here we'll go ahead here and kind of grab the value. we know that sometimes we can define something based on the map where we have the key and we have the value, especially in Terraform. Tag name are key value pair, where you have the key here and you have the value. And when you are doing that, this little portion here is to get a key. And this one here, it's just to get the value. We get a key here and we get a value here. And as soon as we have this, how can we use this now in Terraform? If you open my main.tf, we can first of all go ahead and output all those information. How can we output? We say for VPC data.aws.vpc, and let me also put those data here on the side so that you guys will see here data.aws_vpc, which is this, and .vpc, which is this .id. Data.aws_subnet.subnet1.id, and this is how you will be able to kind of get all those IDs here and use in your Terraform configuration file. Here, this one also, it will be the same thing, like data.aws output is what? Data.aws_security group. And what do we want here? We want to allow all traffic, which is basically this one, allowed all traffic. And we will go ahead here and send .id to grab the ID, right? Now, if you first of all comment out just this block of code here, and I'm not going to create anything for now, and kind of open this one and here we type Terraform in it. First of all, to download the provider. And this is going to download the provider, something that we set in the Terraform block, right? It is done. If we go ahead here and type Terraform plan, as you guys can see here, what happened here is that it basically printed out all those information, which is great, so that I can use this one anywhere that I want in my configuration file, right? Let me go ahead now and explain how we are going to use that also to create an EC2 instance. Let me go ahead and kind of uncomment this. By the way, I am using Shift and / to comment everything out, and also Shift and / control. I mean, if you just want to comment everything, is Control and / and Control / to uncomment. If you're on Windows, if you're on Mac, that one will be Command and / by the way. Here, we want to create an EC2 instance, and we want to get the AMI. As you guys can see here, we have another data source here, which is just an Ubuntu AMI. And you can refer to Terraform documentation to kind of grab this data source, right? How can you filter? Because here, the purpose of this little code here is to filter Ubuntu. We are using Ubuntu here. The image is Ubuntu. We are trying to grab the image ID of Ubuntu server automatically or dynamically from any region where we want to deploy, instead of hard coding the image value in our code. We can basically use the data source to dynamically get the image ID from any region where we want to deploy. And that is basically what this code here is doing. Instead of just hard coding, you can use this to dynamically get those value. And here, how are you going to use that? This is where, instead of putting what you basically grab from AWS console, you can use the data.aws_AMI, and that is Ubuntu .id. And let me open this one on the side, as you guys will see the way that I basically reference that, right? That's for Ubuntu here. As you guys can see, data.aws_AMI Ubuntu, and what are we getting? We are targeting the ID, right? And here, the key name, I have this key already, and we want to launch a T2 micro and the VPC security group. Here we say data_VPC security group, allow all traffic.id, and which is just this, what we have here in this data source, and we are getting the security group ID from this data source. And what is the subnet ID? We just need one subnet ID, and here we want to use the first subnet here. which is AWS_subnet ID .subnet1 and .id, and that's it. With this, we are able now to grab the VPC information and the security group ID information, right, from AWS, and those resources were created already, and we are going to use that here in Terraform to kind of fire up this EC2 instance. If you go ahead now and kind of tap Terraform init, let me make sure that it's nothing is commented out. I'm not going to save anything here. I can save, doesn't really matter. Let me go ahead here and tap Terraform plan. You guys will see that we are going to launch one EC2 instance right here. And I can go ahead here and tap Terraform apply. And this will create this EC2 instance in AWS. I will say yes. I know what I'm doing. And let us check the tag. It is going to use the tag just called VM. And if we go over to AWS under EC2 dashboard, we are going to see that a new VM, it is in the pending state. Very soon it will be in ready state. And it's basically using all those information that we get using the data source. This is very, very useful also in the real world, especially when you have something that exists already or that was already created in AWS and you want to use that in your code. You can basically, there is nothing wrong if you are going up here and you get the VPC ID, you get all the subnet ID and you hard code in your code, right? But that is not a good idea. That's not a good idea. The good idea here, the good way of doing stuff here, it is basically to use the data source parameter to get those information. If you refresh here, you guys will see that that VM is running already. I will go ahead and shut it down. Terraform destroy. Always make sure to clean up every single time when you are doing something so that you will not forget. If you go ahead and forget, what will happen is that AWS will charge you, right? As you are learning, make sure that you clean up every single time. Do not kind of keep resources in AWS that you are not using. You will get charged for that. And that's it for this video. I hope this video was really informative. If yes, please go ahead and let us know in the comment below, and also make sure that you hit the subscribe button so that when we publish a new video, you will be notified. And also please follow us on Twitter, also on Facebook, Instagram, and so on. Thank you. Bye-bye.